Raider!
If you're brand new to Arc Raiders,
Want to team up?
or you played a few raids and feel completely lost, then this video is going to save you hours of frustration. I'm going to break down exactly what Arc Raiders is, what you should be focusing on as a beginner, how to survive your first raids, and some of the biggest mistakes new players are making. By the end of the video, you'll know how to progress faster, die less, and actually enjoy the game instead of feeling like you're getting farmed every single raid. So grab your favorite energy drink and let's start from the beginning. I've timestamped everything below, so if something doesn't interest you, feel free to skip to another part. If you haven't been living under a rock for the last 3 months, you'll know that Arc Raiders has absolutely taken the gaming community by storm. The newest addition to the extraction shooter genre is a third-person PvPvE game, which means you're not just fighting the Arc, which is the game's AI enemy that seem to get smarter every raid, but you're also fighting other raiders in a timed raid in a race to the extraction. Every raid basically follows the same gameplay loop. You drop into a usually large-scale open map, you scavenge for gear and materials to complete your objectives, and you fight hostile machines known as the Arc, and while doing that, you may or may not run into other players doing the exact same thing. If you extract successfully, you keep everything you found, but if you die, you lose all the gear you brought in. And that's what makes Arc Raiders so intense. Every fight matters, every decision matters, and not every enemy you see is someone you should shoot. Unlike traditional shooters like COD and Battlefield 6, Arc Raiders isn't about racking up the most kills. It's about survival, progression, and long-term upgrades. Sometimes the smartest play is avoiding combat entirely. And this is exactly why some beginners struggle at first, because the game doesn't revolve around just recklessly PvPing. So now that you know what the game actually is, let's talk about what you should be focusing on first as a brand new player, so you don't get stuck undergeared and frustrated after the first couple raids. Quick disclaimer before we get into the settings you should adjust. There is no single best graphics setup for everyone. Your ideal settings are always going to depend on your system, your monitor, and what you personally care about more. Maximum frames per second or better visuals in general. So what I'm going to show you here is my current setup, and you can use this as a benchmark to dial in your own settings. Hopping into the practice range will give you a decent example of what changing these settings does. As you can see, adjusting different things will give you a visual cue on what's going to happen to them in the game. So make sure you head on into the practice range when you adjust something. That way you know if you even like what you changed. For reference, I'm running an RTX 4070 Super with an Intel i7. And with these settings, I average around 160 frames per second in raid, and the game runs smooth about 99% of the time. If you've got a similar GPU or CPU, you should get pretty close to this performance. If your rig is weaker, you may need to turn a few things down, and if it's stronger, you can crank things up a bit more. But I always run the game in windowed mode, borderless full screen. I enjoy using NVIDIA DLSS frame generation. This is going to be subjective. I have mine turned up to 2x, VSync off, and NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency on. My frame rate is unlimited, however, my monitor caps me at about 160. For resolution scaling method, I have NVIDIA DLSS, Auto for the quality, and Transformer, which is the more GPU intensive model. A huge setting is you're going to want to turn your field of view all the way up. This is going to give you a bigger field of view so that you can see more of what's happening around you. A real important setting is to have motion blur off. Motion blur is meant to, make the game look more cinematic by blurring the image around the character as you move. In a decently competitive third-person shooter, better to have a clearer picture when you're running around versus any cinematic effect. And it doesn't really have any gameplay benefit to have it turned on. Again, your graphic quality is going to be subjective, but one thing a lot of people point out is that if you turn the foliage down to low, you'll have a lot easier time seeing players if they are hiding in bushes. As you can see, if you swap through it, it changes the amount of foliage that's on the screen. And this can come in handy on maps like Dam Battlegrounds when you're over by the swamp exfil and seeing players that might be hiding in bushes. Hopping on over to the audio tab, one of the main things you're going to want to switch on is night mode, because this will automatically be off. Turning on night mode gives you a lot better depth of sound. You'll be able to hear enemies and footsteps from a lot further away, and audio cues are everything in this game. Moving on over to the accessibility tab, one of the major things you're going to want to mess with is your crosshair. Default, this will be off, and the game will give you a default crosshair. The reason why your crosshair is so important is because Arc Raiders makes use of bloom. Bloom is the mechanic that causes your shots to spread out randomly the longer you hold the trigger down. So even if your crosshair is perfectly on the target, your bullets won't go exactly where you're aiming all the time once bloom is kicked in. And an easy way to manage this visually is by, in the accessibility tab, overriding your crosshair. And again, subjective, but I found that rounded diamond is best. You can swap through each one that Arc Raiders has to offer, and then you can adjust each individual setting to your liking. The thickness of the dot in the middle, but for those who want to copy my settings, you could do so here. And another small setting that surprisingly makes a big difference is your crosshair color. A lot of players just leave it on white or red by default, but in most video games, cyan is usually the best all-around choice. In maps that are full of dark metal and brown, smoke and dark shadows, cyan almost never appears naturally in the environment, so your crosshair doesn't blend into the background the way white or some of these other colors might. And if I'm remembering correctly, cyan is one of the most recognized colors by your brain and stands out from the other ones. So it's a lot easier for you to track your crosshairs in fights without the crosshair getting washed out by any other visuals. A lot of competitive FPS players across different games use cyan for these exact reasons. For my mouse and keyboard players, you'll be able to change your sensitivity input here. I am using an 800 DPI mouse with 45 and 45 for the horizontal and vertical. Again, going to be subjective. Play around in the practice range to figure out what works best for you. Arc Raiders is definitely a game of movement, and movement can be the difference between you winning and losing a gunfight. I've actually binded my roll and other abilities to my mouse buttons. That way I'm never actually taking my hands off the directional keys at any point. Movement's definitely going to be a little bit easier for you on mouse and keyboard. However, my controller players might be able to take advantage of the Elite control paddles to mimic some of the mouse and keyboard movements that you can see. So you understand what Arc Raiders actually is, and you've got your settings dialed in. Now let's talk about what you should really be focusing on first as a brand new player or a newer player, because Arc Raiders at first can be extremely confusing. There's tons of different loot, and there's really no explanation as to what this stuff does or what you should even be taking out of raids. I'm nearly done with my second expedition, so I got a fair bit of knowledge on what you should be focusing on and taking out of raids to begin with. And in my opinion, your workshop and workbenches are the most important things to focus on early on. Upgrading them unlocks better gear, better weapons, stronger attachments, and way more crafting options. A lot of beginner players will just hop into raids and just hoard random loot in their stash, not knowing what does what. But the earlier you upgrade these, the easier every future raid becomes. So whenever you're choosing what loot to extract with or to even pick up along the way, ask yourself if it helps you upgrade your workbench. And there is an easy way to figure that out. When you're able to level up a workbench, click on it and go down to here where it says track resources and click this. As you pick these items up in game, it will put this little icon that looks like an eye next to it, letting you know in game when you find this item that this is a tracked resource that you need for your workbenches. So when you first get into the game, make sure you go to each one of your benches and click the track resources button. That way when you're in raid, you're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off, wondering what to keep and what not to keep. For my players that want to skip the grind, there are some really handy resources out there that'll show you what you need for levels 1, 2, and 3. That way you can keep track of that while you're in game, but it will get overwhelming, so just focus on one at a time. Early on when I started playing, I used to write what I needed on a little piece of paper and I kept it by my monitor. The next thing you focus on, and similar to your workbenches, is Scrappy. Upgrading Scrappy is one of the most underrated things in the early game because he is going to help you get more value out of every raid. The longer you stay in the raid, the more materials you get, and these materials are essential for crafting items you are going to need in the game. If you are unsure what each of these materials can provide you, simply hover over them and it'll tell you right here. Metal parts can be used to craft ammos and certain guns, fabric for bandages and heals, plastic parts for grenades and augments, and so forth. Assorted seeds are good because they sell for a lot of money and they can be used to trade for items that you need via the trader Celeste, who will gladly take your seeds off you for certain items. And again, make sure you're going to the train tab and tracking your resources. That way when you're finding these items in game, you know to come out with them. Alright, so now you know what you need to upgrade your workbenches. You know which items to look for, which items to get out of the raid. But the real question is, where are you actually going to find that stuff in the map? And what map should you go to find those things? This is where map knowledge becomes everything in a game like Arc Raiders and every other extraction shooter. Luckily, Arc Raiders isn't like Tarkov in the fact that it actually provides you an in-game map that is fairly detailed and will let you know what's going on. But it doesn't hurt to use a free resource like mapgenie.io. I actually paid for a lifetime membership for this when I was playing Tarkov, and it really helped out. If you go to the Arc Raiders section, you can choose which map you're going to play. By clicking on it, it'll load everything to begin with. Normally, I just go up here to hide all, and then I can choose what I want to show on the map based on what I'm looking for. It will show you the high tier loot zones. You can actually click the locations so that you know what they're called on the map. The locked doors, if you have keys, it'll show you those locations. And another big thing will be player spawns. That way you'll start to learn the spawns where you've spawned and where other players are going to be spawning. You can also see the extraction points by clicking the cargo elevator, and there will be a timestamp in-game that lets you know when these extractions close and if they're actually even open to extract from to begin with. This will also help you with your mission objectives, and as of right now, this is a free resource. So try to pick one map where the arcs tend to be, player spawns and the player pathing, and where you're going to extract, because having some map knowledge will definitely keep you alive and help you survive more raids in Arc Raiders. So at this point in the video, you've got enough information to actually hop into your first raid. But before you do, we need to go over the the most debated topic in all of Arc Raiders. Should you be friendly or should you shoot on sight? Should you PvE or should you PvP? If you go anywhere online, YouTube, Reddit, Discord, Twitter, my comment section in my videos, you will run into this exact argument. Some players think Arc Raiders should be all about PvP. Others think it should be mostly cooperative with occasional player fights if need be. And honestly, the debate is part of what makes the game so interesting and so good. One of the best things about Arc Raiders is that there is no correct way to play it. You're not forced to be friendly, you're not forced to be aggressive, you get to choose how you want to play each raid. And that freedom is exactly why every encounter feels unpredictable and fun. You can genuinely have friendly encounters in Arc Raiders. You could team up, you could trade loot, trade blueprints, and even help each other extract. But you should never assume someone is going to be friendly just because they say they are. Some of the most brutal deaths in this game come from trusting the wrong person. And on the flip side of being friendly, if you shoot on sight every single time, you're probably going to get put into more aggressive lobbies. You're also going to attract Arc because they're attracted off sound, and you're going to run into a lot of third-party players and unnecessary fights that might stop you from getting on the raid. So extremely aggressive PvP isn't always the smartest play either. Simple beginner rule for Arc Raiders: decide how you want to play before you hop in the game. If you don't want to fight, don't. If you don't need to fight, don't. But never put yourself in a position where somebody can just absolutely destroy you from behind. Always assume that a betrayal is possible. Play friendly if you want, play aggressive if you want. There's really no wrong choice here. Just understand the risks of both. Because in Arc Raiders, every other player you meet is an absolute gamble. And that's what makes the game so fun and so tense. Decide for yourself what kind of player you want to be before you hop into your first raid. Let's break it down. You know what to focus on, you know how the progression works, you know you might run into some other raiders and you're gonna have to decide whether or not you want to shoot them. But here's the thing, other players aren't actually the biggest threat in Arc Raiders. The Arc is. The Arc isn't just there to farm for easy XP. They are the main thing that's going to kill you in your first couple raids. Most beginners don't die to PvP. They die because they get into a fight with an Arc enemy and they don't know how to kill him. So you're going to need to understand what you're really fighting out there, because every Arc enemy is different. They have different weak points, they have different attack patterns, and they're a different danger level. And there's a right and wrong way to fight each one. So what I'm going to do for you in this section is I'm going to break down each Arc enemy and your fastest and safest way to kill them. First up is the Tick. Ticks are spider-like Arc machines that will leap at your raiders like something out of the Alien movie. When it's been aggroed, it'll make this robotic shuffling sound prior to just jumping at you, and they do a little bit of damage, but they're easily killed with a couple shots or the swing of your pickaxe, as long as you can track them down. Next up is the Pop. Pops are small, unarmored Arcs that pack a pretty big punch, even though they're easy to kill. As long as you keep your distance, they're pretty easily defeated with heavy ammunition or a couple shots from the other guns. You usually find the fireballs rolling with the Pops, and if you're not careful, they'll light your ass on fire. However, it's easy to defeat fireballs as long as you time it well. When they roll up on you, they'll open their faceplate, allowing for you to shoot it, and generally it's a one-shot with most ammunition. Throughout the different maps, you'll run into turret-like Arc enemies that lock onto raiders and either launch a beret of bullets or one single large shot. Smaller turrets have no armor plating, easily destroyed. However, the larger ones take a few more shots. Snitches don't actually have any weapons or armor, but when it's in its alerted state, it emits a loud siren that alerts nearby Arc and nearby raiders before calling in its reinforcements, which is a group of wasps and hornets. Wasps are the easiest to destroy out of the flying Arc machines, and you'll know you've aggroed them when they're emitting that red targeting laser beam. Destroying 2 of a wasp's thrusters will cause it to fall to the ground. Just keep in mind, if you're only able to destroy one thruster, it flies erratic and sometimes it's hard to fight. Hornets are pretty much like wasps, although they're a bit beefier. If you notice, the front thrusters have an armor plating around it, so it's important to aim for the thrusters that are on the back because they're exposed. Just like the wasp, destroying 2 of its thrusters will make it fall to the ground, and if it falls from high enough, it'll instantly destroy it. As a beginner player, leapers should probably be avoided. However, if you find yourself aggroing one, try to find cover or a place with a lot of trees. And if you have blaze grenades, leapers are weak to fire, so make sure you're throwing those at them. Usually after a couple blaze grenades, heavy ammunition will finish off a leaper pretty fast. That sound is one of the worst sounds you can hear in the game, because that means you've aggroed a Rocketeer. Rocketeers deal a significant amount of damage and can kill you in 2 shots, and as a beginner player, you're just going to want to avoid aggroing them entirely. Again, as a beginner player, the rest of the Arc machines you're just going to want to avoid entirely until you have a little bit more experience and better weapons, and you're actually coming in the raid to kill them. Certain upgrades to your workbenches will require you to kill multiple amounts of these enemies. And to craft some of the best weapons in the game, you will have to defeat the Matriarchal Queen at some point. But it's best done once you have a little bit more experience. All right, there's one last thing we got to talk about before you get involved in some real raids. Let's talk about the skill tree, because what you put your early points into is going to make a huge difference on whether or not you survive and how consistent you are. There's probably about 100 to 200 videos on the best way to go about your skill tree, but from my point of view, using your early points into mobility gives you the best bang for your buck. Being able to climb and vault more quickly, having the ability to move around without draining a lot more stamina, increasing your maximum stamina is all going to help you survive earlier on. Once you get a good amount of points into mobility, then you can start going up into these other trees and looking into some things you might want to do, like broad shoulders and in-game crafting, which I actually don't even bother with. The skill tree is subjective. A lot of people will say, oh, the skill tree is not good. The skill tree is really good. It's all going to be how you play the game. I build my skill tree according to how I play the game, and you're also able to reset it if you screw up for 200 coins. So how do you level up and get points? Well, in Arc Raiders, you earn XP from almost everything you do inside a raid. Searching containers, damaging and killing the Arc, fighting other raiders, looting other raiders, surviving on the surface for a certain amount of time, and successfully extracting. Every one of these things you do gives you XP. Even if a container is empty and already been looted, if you search it, it will still give you the XP from it. That's why knowing the map, knowing where you're going, and having a smart route and survival looting playstyle can net you more XP and help you progress faster than just loading in and chasing every fight and sound you hear. The goal isn't just killing everything, it's efficient progression while surviving raids. Everything you've seen in this video is just the foundation of Arc Raiders, but once you've gotten a few raids under your belt, the real depth of Arc Raiders starts to show. Now, I break all of this down in my video, what I learned in 300 hours of Arc Raiders. So if you're ready for some more advanced tips, click on that video right here. I've also linked it in the description below. And if this video helped you and you found value in it, make sure you subscribe and throw a like to help me out with the YouTube algorithm so that other people can find it. And leave a comment below if I missed out any tips. Are there any things that you think I should have added? My name's Strong. I will see you on the next one.